for your team. You can't help but try to figure out how the pieces fit in the puzzle there, and we'll work together, um, and then inevitably uh, complement one another and win games for you.
Coach, your team did such a good job tush push in these championship players. A lot big on the play itself. What do you think about the play itself?
Yeah, listen, I understand how it can go both ways. I think it takes uh, certain players to be able to do that, and that's not an easy thing for the center. I was close to their center, so I know that's not an easy thing to do, and my hat goes off to them for making it as consistent as they are doing it. Now, there are other things you have to look at. You got to look at the injuries that take place, or whatever the other deals are that they evaluate on it. So I don't have all that information, but I mean it's a heck of a play. I know that. Yeah, I would tell you yes. There are a lot more coaches now than when I first started. You didn't have the same number of coaches on a staff. Maybe a little bit like um, medicine, where you're just specific to this one area, and I think that you're seeing more of that in the coaching world, where um, you know it's maybe not tight ends, offensive line, it's not tight ends, and then you have an assistant offensive line coach. Most teams have two of them, and defensive line's kind of the same way. Maybe it's the defensive ends, the defensive tackles, and you split that up. So secondary is the same way. So there, there's a lot of, and then you have the worker bees in there, the quality control guys, and you can have a number of those guys that are younger guys that are working their way up through, but there are a lot of areas that they can work on, especially the more technologies become available for you.
Kind of reminds me of the Super Bowl against the Buccaneers. Patrick Mahomes running for his life. Where would you put priority at left tackle this offseason?
I think like every offseason, I don't want to offensive line, defensive line. I mean, you got to get a quarterback, right? And so we have one, and we're blessed to have one. But I think if you look at how we've handled the off seasons, whether it was a Joe Tooney or trading for a Brown or a Taylor or Frank Clark or Chris Jones. I mean, it's Mike Dana last year. I mean, we're always investing in the offense and defensive lines. It's just some years you have more numbers to work with than others, and I mean that would probably be a similar challenge this year, and it's just coming up with some different, unique plans. But I think our priority is always on the fronts first, and this will be no different. Yeah, I think there's a good possibility. It's funny, Brooke, you mentioned that. I was just talking to an agent. He had a couple running backs coming up, and I said if you'd asked me a few years ago, I wouldn't have been as optimistic. But with the years, some of the guys that signed last year had, I think everything kind of comes full circle, and teams always it goes and flows where it's a run league, then it's a pass league, then it gets a little bit more balanced. But I certainly think when you have those, especially when you have those unique guys that have a full skill set where they can run, catch, and block, I think you'll start to see those guys coming back up to where they should be in the market.
In what regard will you miss Mike?
Well, shoot, Mike was like a best friend for me. I mean, he was the first guy I met when I came to Kansas City. We shared an office together for years, and he was one of those guys that when you go through a transactional period, whether it be free agency or the draft, I mean, you're always going to have big group discussions, small group discussions, discussion with your head coach, and then you're going to pull a guy to the side to really just share your thoughts and ideas with, and he was that guy for me. So I'm going to miss that, and I'm sure we'll still have some of those dialogues now when we're both vying for a same position or a same need, maybe with each other. But he's a great guy. I'm really happy for him and his family, and I think he'll do some really good things there in Tennessee.
One of the things that's interesting about you guys have had in the last couple of years, other than great success, is Patrick Mahomes, his average per target has gone down year after year. In the last year, he's the 41st, 43 quarterbacks. Is that a function of just luck
What was?
In the average depth of target,
Okay.
numbers have gone down
Yeah.
the last couple of years, really kind of bottomed out this year. Is that a personnel thing for you? Is it an injury thing? How do you try to address it so it's not bottoming?
Yeah, no, I think it's a combination of everything, and I think we, again, approach every offseason where we want to get him, um, not overthink. You know, he's grown and developed so much where, um, Coach Nagy and I talk about this. He knows maybe too much at this point. Where I mean, he's seeing things that maybe defenses don't even do now because he's that far advanced. But I think it just comes down to settling his feet and him trusting the protection up front, and that's a continual point of emphasis for us. And you know, that's why we always make it a priority to invest in the lines, and I think we'll have that approach. It's just it becomes more difficult, and that's why the league is so great. I mean, the more you win, the harder it's supposed to be. And so, when you have a bunch of guys that are at the top of the market for their position, and then you have to pick last or close to last every year, it becomes really challenging. So you just have to kind of think outside the box and put some creative plans together. And we've been able to do that in different areas, different positions, and that's where the focus will be. Just continue to have him play confident behind the pocket, and we'll certainly always look to add weapons. And you know, the last 2 years we've added two great receivers. It's a shame she got hurt because I think he had a chance to be a top 10 receiver, and then the progress Worthy made last year. I think those guys will be a dynamic combination, and we'll see if we can get Hollywood back. But again, receiver will be a position that we'll never shy away from.
Maybe similar to the free agents with as far as running backs. There's a couple projected to go in the first round this year. Do you think that's a byproduct of the strength of this running back class or the way that offenses are trending in general?
I think it's a combination of both. Obviously, the Boise State kid. I think when you have tape that is that dominant, and you have a skill set that performs the level he did week in and week out, you know, anytime you watch a player and the projection is easy, you feel more comfortable in investing. And again, when you put out tape at that high a level, you know, you're always going to come into play. But I think it's a combination of both, and I think that this is a deep running back class. I think that's the one position offensively. I think it's deep running back. In general, I think it's more of a defensive draft. I think that the talent is on the defensive line and the corners, and I think it's a solid linebacking crew. So, but again, I think, and also teams are, you know, you need more than one. I mean, it's a long season, and you have to have a good tandem there. And you know, you saw the Niners the last few years when they were operating at their peak. I mean, they had the guys like, you know, the young undrafted free agent with McCaffrey with Elijah Mitchell. I mean, they've had a tandem there for a while. So I think having multiple running backs is a trend too that could elevate where those guys go.
There's a lot of success in late round running backs. Is that because there's not a lot of players necessarily in the position, or are you just hitting on gems late in the draft?
I think it's because, again, going back to generally the philosophy of most teams, you're going to have O-line, D-linemen that maybe they don't have the best tape, but they have qualities to work with, and they're going to go higher. I mean, you could have a lineman that maybe has played a limited amount, but I mean, they have the size, the length, the athletic ability to work with. I mean, those guys probably go ahead of running backs that have rushed for 1,000 yards for 3 years. So what happens is you get guys like that logjam late in the draft, and you have a lot of these guys, and it's a matter of working through all the names and then finding the fit to make sure he fits what we do offensively. And I think that's what we did with Isaiah. It's just corners, tackles, defensive linemen. Those guys are going to go. When their tape's good, they go high, and when their tape's average, they're still going to go in the middle rounds. Whereas the running backs, I mean, you can have a running back that rushes for 1,000 yards for 3 years and still go in the 6th or 7th round. So I think that's typically why there's more of a likelihood of hitting on running backs late in the draft. Well, it's outstanding, and on top of the hire that Vegas made, I'm close with John Spytek, and surprised he wasn't a GM sooner. I mean, he's a really talented guy. He's a guy that I work with in Philadelphia. So between him and obviously Coach Payton and Coach Harbaugh and Coach Reid, I mean, it's an all-star lineup. And I mean, look, again, we had a really successful regular season and went 15-1. But if you look at the games that we played against the Chargers and the games we played against the Broncos, they were probably our toughest games and our most physical games. And that's not going to change, and those teams are only going to add to what they have talent-wise and get better. So it'll be a challenge just to win the division next year, and I think that's kind of the mindset we have going in the offseason.
Thanks, everybody. We gotta go. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
How many do you think can go in the first 2 rounds? It seems like there's a lot of guys.
Oh shoot. I mean that's we probably have 5 to 6 right now, but I mean that number it will probably, as soon as some of these guys that we have in a third round run 4-4 or 4-3, then all of a sudden that number goes from 6 to 8 to 9 pretty quickly. So it's a good group. That group and the defensive line group is really deep. So hopefully we can add to our roster for sure at some point in the draft. Yep. Thanks.